going to make a video about an old subject because I've done this before, and if you've heard it, then you might gain a little something new from this. I'm going to explain it more in depth about the Middle East situation, and this applies to really any other militarized, violent conflict in the world. Okay? And this starts with you at home or work or wherever you are, but you in your own place, your own world. And your state of mind should be neutrality. And I'm neutral as much as I can. It is a philosophy, it is an action, it is a movement. It's the true protest. Now, I explained to you why. If you just listen, I'm going to explain it, and then we can discuss from this foundation, a foundation of a proper state of mind. And I call it grand neutrality because it's so big. It's overall neutral stance on things. Neutrality is the best way to approach things and the solution from where we are. It's not like the ultimate, ideal thing. I wouldn't be recommending it in another world, but I look at the reality that there is, and I say neutrality, being neutral, is the way to go. Now, the reason for that is because you have a manipulation from a shadowy source, from a shadow government, let's say, or the elites, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call it. And with this kind of like obstruction, shadowy forces of power, plutarchy, making decisions, they're manipulating what's going on the ground with the people. And because of that, you have the problem. But it's not just that. It is the way that people react and fall into this trap that is the main problem. You see, they actually learned during World War I, but they didn't apply it. They learned a great lesson during the Christmas truce, and you ought to look this up because we cannot forget this. They're trying to bury the truth about it. During World War I, now hear me out, because this is probably one of the more important things about this video. There was a Christmas truce. I believe it was it 1914? I could be off by the year. But during the early years of the conflict, which later came on to be called the Great War, World War I, the troops themselves on the ground decided to have a truce. And they went against the orders of the officers, and they went against the orders of the shadowy plutarchy and the powers that be, the elites. And they just said, we're not going to kill anybody. We don't want to do this. We do not agree that there is any purpose for this. We're not against each other. So the two sides, like French, English, Germans, and whoever else was involved of the different warring factions in Europe, laid down their arms, and they had peace. It didn't last, of course, and it was squelched out. They were ignored, co-opted, taken over. But there was a Christmas truce. Now, getting back to this idea now about neutrality, because obviously those troops went and became neutral for a short time because of their own decision, not the decision of the shadowy powers, these guys that sit around and decide there should be war. Okay? If we as a people, just like those troops, if we as a people decide to be neutral, then the warring powers have no power. They have no authority. They have no influence anymore. And that's, as I said, only if we as a people become neutral. Okay, let me give you this example of the scenario. Okay, so we can conclude this. And I don't think that anybody can argue with this point. It's just a matter of getting everybody to do this as a movement. And like I said, it could take a few years now that I've gotten to this point of explaining it. It can go on another 5, 10 years. I don't know how long it'll take. But I'm committed to a grand neutrality. Here is the scenario. And we're talking about Middle East. We're talking about Israel, the Jews that have been taken over by Zionism. Or let's just call it their people of that nation have been taken over by the false rulership that's over them. Now look at the other side and their internal sides. You've got the Arabs, the Muslims, you have and even some of the Christians there in Lebanon and Egypt. You have them that have their people and then their false rulership that's over them, especially in the Saudis, especially in Iraq now, especially in Egypt, and they're in turmoil now after the elections. So this false, unacceptable rulership over these people. So these are the two major sides that we can see in the Middle East. But look at everybody else outside of it, including possibly you, including myself. I'm not really, I was in the Middle East, I'm not now. So if you are on the outside and you're the majority of the rest of the world, several billion other people, okay? If we were all to be neutral and say, we don't take a side, okay? We don't take a side. We just come together in the center in a neutral position. Not over here, the right, not over here, the left, not any other side, black and white, Arab versus Jew, Israel versus all the nations around them in the Middle East. If we just become neutral, and I'm making a video right now. This kid is getting out on. Let me tell you something. I have to be neutral with my kids, so that's how I learn all this stuff. If we become neutral in the world, I am trying to explain this in this scenario, off in this vlog here. But I mean, let your imagination run. If you all were to become neutral, if you all were to be neutral, then you wouldn't be feeding into the power of the conflict. See, the power of the conflict is to suck you in to that trap of taking a side. That is the problem. And if nobody does that anymore, you can't make excuses. You can't make, take a detail and say, well, they did this then, or they did this one in 1940, and they did this in 1971, or whatever. It doesn't matter anymore. Now is now, and as long as you don't take a side, then you start to diffuse the situation. You ultimately, eventually, gradually will dissolve away the conflict. So think about now, as we conclude my statement, every person that is going into this conflict, that is getting paid off either in heaven later on with 65 virgins or whatever the number is, or getting paid off in money and land and whatever else, why are they doing it? It's because somewhere along the line, somebody took a side. Their father, their uncle, a leader, some covert op, some stupid terrorist, some stupid NATO thing that told this person to take a side. Then they fight. That soldier, that rebel, that whoever it is, that terrorist, whatever you want to call them, whoever's fighting, they do it because, you know what, sometimes I have to use force. But that's the point. You got to restrain. You can't take a side. Just like I say, if two kids are fighting, I just restrain them. I restrict them. I separate them a little bit and everything gets okay because I'm not taking a side. They want me to take a side. They want me to say, he's right, I'm telling on you, this one. See, the world is acting exactly how children would act. You can see it as a microcosm of the macrocosm. But if you're in any authority and if you can solve the situation, you need to be neutral. That way everyone will learn that taking a side doesn't get any support anymore. From the ground up, we can start to change things. You, even you, in your little place in the world, in your own way, you can help be part of the solution. Think about it. Do something. Do something by being neutral.